Jason Wright, president of the Washington football team. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me today.
It's my pleasure, Maxine. Thank you so much for leading it.
It's a big deal that you're in this job. This is a big, big job. What was going through your mind when, first of all, you got the offer and then when you accepted it?
For me, even before I got the offer and talking to Dan and Tanya Snyder, I was thinking about how to solve the problems that the organization needed to solve. What are the first steps I would take around culture change? What are the things I would implement, around policies? And how would I think about a rebrand and a new identity? I was there. And then when the announcement hit and I found out, I didn't know I was the first Black team president. I never thought about it. When the announcement hit and the historicity of it hit, that was a moment for me to reflect and recognize that this was even bigger than I thought. And that I needed to honor that properly. And I couldn't be my normal pragmatic, let's get to work self.
How could you never have thought about it? Like you did DEI work. You were a football player. You have to have known this was a huge, gaping gap.
Yeah. I had never thought about it. I had never thought about it probably because, and this is probably part of why I felt so emboldened to take on a role like this at my age and not think twice about it, is that in my time in the NFL, I had a lot of Black leaders in senior positions. Now, never a team president or an ownership, but my quarterback when I was a rookie was a Black quarterback when that was a rare thing. And my head coach in Cleveland was a Black man. My general manager in Arizona was a Black man. And so I already saw Black leadership in aspects of football where it wasn't normally found. And so that was a bit normalized in my mind. And so I guess I had never thought that, there's never actually been, a head of the whole business operations that's been Black before, or had the title of president before. And so it just never hit me because I had enough role models where I thought it would be there. But then once I realized it, it made sense. It made sense. I thought there are a ton of barriers to this that exist. And so that makes a ton of sense. So let's own this and figure out, how we can use this moment to communicate a message that allows more doors to open like this.
What's interesting is you just called off the names and the positions of people who you saw in your daily life or monthly life, whatever it was, when you were a player and how that mattered. And the amazing thing is going forward, there will be people who will call your name and say, didn't occur to me I couldn't do it because, I had a Black president. So that is really wonderful. And do you think that because you're the type of guy who didn't really focus on that, where do you think that puts you in terms of, is that an advantage or a disadvantage to now have to build certain types of relationships, fix certain types of problems, but also represent certain things, both things that maybe you agree with and you don't agree with?
Yeah, that's right. I think my mindset of going in and thinking about the job first is a good thing. I think it's a good thing that was my primary thought, because ultimately there will be lots of things that people judge me or any person of color or woman or LGBTQ plus person on that they don't judge other folks on. That's the reality of how talent evaluation still operates in most organizations or in most industries. So while there will be those aspects, the bulk of it is still related to the core job. So I think it's good that I think about that first. However, those first few weeks, it was important for me to actually think about the rest as well. Because I think to be able to bear the burden of the additional pressures, questions, the things that come when you're a woman, a person of color, LGBTQ plus, or other underrepresented group, in order to bear that burden effectively, where it doesn't become a hindrance, it becomes an accelerator and fuel and a boost to you, you need to have some awareness. And you have to engage that shadow aspect of the dialogue around your appointment and its significance. And so I'm glad people pushed me to do that in those first days instead of barrel forward, including my parents. My dad was like, look, I was a civil rights activist, man. You better own this. You better own this,
Yeah.
So.
I've heard you also talk about nuances. So there are expectations people will have of you and any person of color who is a leader. And those expectations may be different depending on who that audience is, right? So there's an expectation your father had of you. And then there are expectations that other people, maybe even you could say stereotypes, right? Things people assume of you because of your color.
That's right.
And the way we navigate nuances, now that you are the boss, like there's going to be stuff that people expect you to do that you may say, actually, now that I'm deep into it and I see the nuance in it, I don't think that's the best thing. But it goes against the grain. It goes against type. It goes against, as I say, expectations. There's a mismatch. Have you already started to experience that and the responsibility of it, the challenge of it, of managing through those nuances?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think the thing that helps any of us in that situation is a good dose of humility. I think if we are able to hold our opinion lightly, firmly, but lightly, and that when we get new information, we are able to let aspects of that opinion, that viewpoint, flutter away. If the new information changes it, I think it requires a bit of humility to do that. And that's a hard thing to do as a leader who is expected to be strong and give direction. So I think setting a norm for being willing to engage new ideas, for showing people that you'll be open. Those are the types of things that I think you can role model right away that help. I think secondarily, when you find out the popular opinion that you once held is maybe different or doesn't have the full facts, in moving forward, we needed to actually engage with, speak to, substantively address a portion of a community that felt differently than I expected. And I needed people around me who I could speak to openly about that, to test my raw ideas, who weren't going to judge me or cancel me or blast me when I took the first couple rounds articulating what I was learning. So I needed a trusted circle. And then I needed a way of honestly communicating the journey. And I think this is where we leaders can be a bit more courageous and do more of. And that is role model what it means to go on a journey where your perspective shifts or where your mind changes, and to reveal those moments. Because if you show the process a bit, those who are actually treating the issue in good faith, I think can get on board and can understand. And it might actually be a great educational aspect for everybody.
The example you just gave also goes to the fact that there is no one view or one opinion from any group, right? That's the thing about diversity, is that it's diverse. So just because you come from a minority group doesn't mean everybody in that group has the same opinion, right? There's diversity within the diversity. And what you seem to be saying is that, like, as you got into it and came to understand that, you're like, whoa, this thing is more complex. There's subtleties here, there's nuances here, and how do I communicate that? And I think that is challenging. It's much easier to communicate something that's simple, and it's much harder to do so when it is complex. Same for decision making.
They often say, when a well-meaning friend says something that, you could consider offensive, but they'll say, how do Black people think about this, Jason? I'm like, well, let me check my notes from the Global Black People Conference that we had last week and see what our consensus position was from all Black folks around the globe. Like, it happens. Our brains are prone to stereotype for evolutionary reasons, so I have grace for it. But it's important that where we can, and for me as a person of color, I get a little more grace on nuance and sharing some of those things. And so I do think it's a role that I and you and others can play when giving voice to different perspectives that might normally get slammed if it didn't come in this package.
Yes, well, we will try. We will try. And keeping with that, I understand that one of the strategies that you're trying is to use organizational structure to achieve what you want. Tell me something about that, because we've been talking about sort of people and community and the impact of that. But how does structure play into this? What can structure deliver against your goals?
Yes, this is a great question. So for me, when I thought about the culture change that we needed to affect in this organization, which was one around empowering the workforce, specifically women, people of color, from a DEI lens, but also having more of a voice for the frontline, those folks who are closest to our fans, for them to be able to participate in bottoms-up innovation and things like that. I knew that the quickest lever that was going to get us a bit of bang for the buck early on was in senior leadership, because the senior leadership in the organization sets the tone for the level of openness, the communication, the norms that are acceptable, especially in sports culture, with sports roots in the military and all of that. It tends to be very hierarchical. Mm. And so for me, when I looked at the change that we needed to make, there were a set of changes that we made early on. They were messy. They're a bit disruptive. It's not ideal to switch out 90% of the leadership team in the first 3 months, but we did. And it made a material difference. But I think it immediately spoke to folks, number one, that we meant it around culture change. And the type of leaders we brought in were those that, while there might be a hierarchy or reporting structure, were non-hierarchical in their problem-solving approach. We're looking for great ideas from anywhere.
How do you test for that?
How do you test for that? You ask. You ask. Like, so for example, when I was interviewing folks, I'd give a little bit of a case example. And I'd say, here's the problem you're facing. You've got to solve this. How do you get started on it? And one of the markers that I ask for, and it's usually a problem we're actually trying to solve. I usually try to give real examples, because if I don't hire them, I got some great ideas, right? So I'll throw out a real problem, and I'll look for, their rigor, their attention to detail, how they engage data, but I'll also look at how ecumenical their decision-making process is. Are they able to get perspectives from various different angles, from diverse populations? Or do I have to push to say, okay, if you're doing a focus group, how do you compose that focus group? How do you think about it? If I have to push 3, 4, 5 times and it's not intuitive to them to get different perspectives, and I know, okay, this might not be the leader that fits with our culture, or the way that we want to build, or the type of business we want to build. Because ultimately, diversity, yes, it's about equity and fairness and a sense of justice, frankly, but it is also for us about good business, because all the research points to making better decisions when you have a diverse set of leaders and leaders who encourage and attract diversity. You actually get to better business outcomes. So for us, our turnaround is not just cultural, it's also financial. And in our business turnaround, we have to have diversity. We won't make it.
Well, so here's the thing. Diversity will give you better problem solving, particularly if you have complex problems to solve. But it is also much harder to manage than homogeneity. So when you test, right, and you're trying to see in an interview process, how much does somebody, collaborate, how much do they seek other opinions, how do you determine if they can actually manage a diverse team?
Yeah, I like to talk to people that have worked with them. So I will go back channel, whether it's through a search firm, whether it's through people in my network, and I'm gonna find at least one person that's worked directly with you that wasn't on your reference list. But I'm also going to ask directly about a time when they cultivated somebody as a leader, as a mentee, et cetera, that was different from their own background. I'll ask directly about that. And I want to hear the story. I want to hear the story of how it materialized. I want to understand how they see difference in the first place. Because even when I ask that question, I don't ask about ethnic diversity. I don't ask about gender diversity. Specifically, I want to see how they think about difference and what they would consider different. And it gives me a lot of insight into how they would lead. But you can never be perfect. It's not an exact science. And right. I think the way that you get to sustainable, inclusive leadership over time is very open and regular communication about their leadership impact. So you need regular feedback. You need two-way feedback, because you need to be vulnerable to get vulnerability from those that you're giving feedback to. I think wherever possible, we can build 360 evaluation into our leaders across all levels. Because when you're actually thinking about your peers having any hand in your evaluation, you suddenly treat them differently. You suddenly are more inclusive. And so it brings it top of mind. I think there are mechanical things that we can do to reinforce it, but it's not a perfect science, and you shouldn't be too afraid to cut bait if it's not working.
Was it a tough decision to hire Jennifer King, first Black woman assistant coach?
Well, I can't take credit for that. And that's why so there are sort of two chief executives in our org, me for the business and Coach Revere for the football side. And it's obviously an amazing decision. And Coach made it. Same thing with hiring Martin Mayhew as a general manager, Black man as general manager. And what Coach would say to you is, yes, I'm glad there's all the fanfare associated with Coach King. She's a remarkable coach, and she's earned this. She's one of the few people that's coached at a high level across 2 sports. She was a basketball coach in the NCAA before. So she's just a remarkable athletic mind and strategic thinker. But Coach would say, look, I'm looking forward to the moment where people are just like, that's Coach. And I admire that. I admire that deeply. So he's been a great partner on this. He's been a role model on that side of the business that then allows me to go big and bold on my side of the business too.
Right. So you work together, but you each have your lanes, and that helps too.
That's right.
Have you been involved at all in the Playmakers Black Creative Network, which is a partnership with Facebook, essentially giving people opportunity, connecting great minds, creators to people in the sports industry, so that through those partnerships, we can create even more. It's getting people into spaces that they may not have been in before, and seeing what comes out of that. So as we build the diverse cognitive pool, we know that we will get more out of that. And so we've partnered with you and other teams as well, to see how we can get some of that going.
Well, I love the power of community in this, right? We're seeing a lot of benefit for that just within our organization, and to do that across organizations, I think would be very powerful. One of the things that happened actually prior to me joining, as the ownership of our organization started to make an inclusion push, is they stood up Black Engagement Network within our organization. So it's the Black ERG within the Washington football team. And it's actually, surprisingly, the first Black ERG of a National Football League team was for us. It was started last summer, right? And we started our Women's Initiative Now network, which is our women's ERG. And more than that, a portfolio of both business and civic activities around both of those. And when you get that network together, and especially if you get outside perspectives, which is what this collective is trying to do through Facebook, you get a bunch of innovation. So just by starting BEN, Black Engagement Network, we all of a sudden found ourselves leading the way on social justice topics. Just because we've created a venue for minds to come together that were interested in this topic, had proximity to it, and did great things. Our voting campaign ended up being something the entire NFL picked up, opening our stadium to register people to vote and to provide a super polling station, to provide waters and food for folks waiting in line. Like, that comprehensive plan came together for all of the DC area and the entire league because of what our BEN network did. Our players worked with our BEN network to think about how they could affect police reform. And this is a diverse group of players, white guys, black guys. They came out of one of their meetings with Coach saying, we really want to do something on this. So they were part of getting legislation pushed through in Virginia that changed policing practices in the state, and are now, and just this last week, testified in support of a bill for the state of Maryland to do the same. And so as a result, amazing things are happening very quickly, just because you provide a network and a collective that can put their resources and their power together.
And you say just because, but you should drop that just. It is a powerful thing to bring those minds together, because it is literally the result of leveraging humility plus diversity. Humility in the sense of appreciating that just because you're on top doesn't mean you know all the answers. Or just because you're an expert in this area does not mean you can solve every problem. So the point of having cognitively diverse teams or groups of people working on problems together is to leverage all the stuff you don't have, all the experiences you don't have, the things you haven't thought about. And often it comes from people who are not considered the experts, but they may have the lived experience that you don't have, right? They have perspectives to bring. And so I think with any organization, if you have that humility, and you create space for people, and often it is through an employee resource group, you create space for people to contribute. Like, what can come out of it is remarkable. I mean, we have so many examples of Facebook of that happening. Going back to one of the first ones I remember is, when Facebook was created, if you started a Facebook account, you were asked for your gender. That was one of the ways you identified yourself, but there were only 2 options. You could only choose male or female. That was it. It was binary. Because the people creating it at the time didn't think. They perhaps didn't have the experiences. And once we had our Pride FBRG, they started saying, hold on, this doesn't work for everyone. And if you are trying to create a platform that connects everyone, it is in your business interest to have it be a platform that everyone is represented in, so they want to connect. And leveraging the people in the FBRG, working with our engineers, etc., we created what is called custom gender now. And now when you go in, you can select, depending on your country, like in the US, it's 57 options, plus there's still an open field. Because even those 57, there's still things that some people like, I still don't see me represented. And I remember when we launched that, I received messages from people I didn't know, who were people who use Facebook, saying, I remember one that really stood out where the person said, it is the first time I felt like I could show up as me and breathe.
Wow. And this is where I hope we evolve to. And I was going to ask you about this actually, because diversity should translate into product innovation.
Yes.
Because the reason that we are bringing in these different minds is to create something that then can explode to new populations and new demographics, or renew the interest and excitement of longtime customers and fans. And this simple change not only is good for the business, but also creates an emotional tie between, this person you talked about and Facebook, to say, I am seen. When you tie in that way to somebody that you're doing business with, that relationship becomes really strong. It is really difficult to break that relationship. And that's good for the business, and that's good for society.
Absolutely. And we have so many examples. We launched recently something called Buy Black Friday, right? Where, again, as a business, you're trying to figure out, how do I create value for the people who use it? Well, small businesses and minority-owned businesses are suffering, right? It's harder to get capital and to do well. But on top of that, with the impact of COVID, it was ridiculous. And it was employees who got together and created that campaign. We created a racial justice hub. Again, ideas from employees. Like, absolutely. Again, if your organizational structure is one that allows for openness and your strategies drive diversity and inclusion, when you combine that with an approach of humility, I mean, there's no stopping you. Like, you are going to get the best. You're going to get delivery on potential, right? It's just that getting all those pieces in place sometimes can be challenging for companies.
Well, I'll add one thing to that. You said something really important, and that's about the flow of capital, right? And we know that there's a capital differential, there's a racial capital differential, there's a gender capital differential. I don't know, I haven't seen research on LGBTQ plus capital differential, but I at least know it exists on those first two. And as I think about our organizations, Facebook, the Washington football team, I think we need to think about our role in breaking the dams that prevent capital from flowing equitably to other places. So you're talking about, Shop Black initiative, which is a way for Facebook, given its influence, to get capital to flow to these businesses. We copied that. We do a year-round Shop Black effort as well. We've got something standing on our webpage that is about Black businesses in the DC area that are affiliated with the club that we point people to. But one of the things I'm thinking about on a larger scale, one of the reasons I took this role, is that we're getting ready to enter the process of building a new venue, a new home for the team. And that's going to deploy billions of dollars of capital. It's going to invest that much capital into the region. And, I couldn't think of another job where a 38-year-old brother from LA was going to have the ability to deploy that level of capital with a lens on equity. And so already in our early stages of approaching that project, we made it a mandate for the project management firms and others that we interviewed to participate with us to have substantial, not nominal, participation from Black-owned, brown-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses. And as a result, it required the usual players to find partners and search deep and put these businesses that are often overlooked for these sort of projects to the fore. But we actually have gotten to a better set of options for us that are going to lead us on a better journey in building this new venue as a result. And at the end of it, we should see a perpetual business through our new venue that is continually, year over year, plowing value into businesses, into census tracts that don't normally get that sort of value. And as a result, close the racial wealth gap, close the gender wealth gap.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a brother who runs our supplier diversity program, and we've just made a $1.1 billion commitment by the end of 2021 to spend with minority-owned businesses, including at least 100 million with Black-owned businesses. I mean, the way that substantively changes lives, opportunities, futures, right, for whole people. But it just takes that sort of deliberate focus on seeing where the gap is, right? You talk about a wealth gap, and what can we do to close it, right? And it is so different from any discussion about handouts. It's just like when you talk about diversity, like nobody's talking about giving unqualified people jobs. Why would you do that? Like, no, it is not about that. It's about leveling a playing field and being able yourself to get better results, to get better talent, right? Because you have now widened it, because you can see all of the value in people who you wouldn't have considered before. So you didn't even have a proper competition before. You weren't choosing the best because you weren't choosing among the best, right? And so broadening that and doing it with a deliberate lens, it really makes a fundamental difference. So I'm like thrilled. And I'm from Virginia, but I am thrilled that people are going to get the opportunity to show what they can deliver, and that, you know, that there will be some wealth creation in this, as there should be. So that is just a wonderful aspect of what you're going to do. I know that we have run out of time. And I'm just so thankful. Thank you so much, Jason. And I hope everybody watching has enjoyed. I certainly have.